Fisher, there's been quite a bit of bantering back and forth about whether or not this is a program that should have been cut, wanted to be cut. It's a program that in fact we've budgeted over the last several years many tens of thousands of dollars for and spent only a fraction of those dollars. And proper budgeting and competent budgeting would have allowed that we cut back those funds rather than have them sit in a budget line item that doesn't get used. And I'll turn this over to Mr. Fisher at this point and let him go through those numbers and where the sites are.
I spent a bit of time, we'll step over here, this will reach, but a bit of time putting together a bit of a presentation here in the last 3 weeks. Took a lot of information that is in the town's records regarding the well monitoring program. I tried to put it together so we can try to make some sense out of it and move forward. Each of the board members has at the table a copy of the presentation that I've put together here in a quick slideshow. This is about approximately 24 private wells and private residences that, as best I've been able to determine, we began monitoring in about 2008. And again, the purpose of those is to try to establish a database or frame of reference for static water levels in those wells, with the eye to the possibility that at some point in time in the future, the city of Waukesha may endeavor to construct high-capacity shallow aquifer wells on the Lathers property, which is on that slide in yellow, or in other wells in the southwest part of the township here. So if you look at those, the approximate locations of all of the participants are shown in red dots. As I've been able to figure out, I think there are approximately 3 participants who have opted out of the program during that period of time. So this is just kind of an orientation thing. I think there's even a couple people in the room who probably see their names on those areas. And move to the next slide here. The next thing I did is, again, trying to get some of the town's records together, is to make a graphic representation here, and you'll see the calendar years 2008, 9, 10, then an extra 11, 12, 13, 14, and obviously 15 and 16 yet to come, and try to show here graphically when this monitoring has been done. So each one of these basically shows a month within the year. It's a little bit hard to read up there on the screen, but there's numbers behind them, those intervals of monitoring. So importantly, you can see, as best as I've been able to figure out, we actually did 5 tests during 2008 of all of those wells. In 2009, 3 tests, 2010, 4 tests. The last of that was completed right near the end of the year. And then there was no testing done in 2011 and no testing done in 2012 until September. So there's almost a 2-year gap in between there. 2013 we tested 3 times, and we've tested 1 time already in 2014. I have been in touch with the folks at Guthrie Fry and basically directed them to proceed with the next battery of tests here in July, which would kind of keep us on the sequence that we've been at. Talk a little bit more about that in a minute. I've taken and put together a master spreadsheet with each one of those wells that shows the static level at each of those testing intervals. We're not going to go into that tonight. I intend to provide all of that information organized to talk about that in a bit to Professor Cherkauer, along with the map that shows locations of wells, frequency of testing, so you'll have the entire body of information that we have got. Even backing up a bit to that map, there has been discussion in the last couple of years of adding additional well test sites. to the group of approximately 24. To the best of my knowledge, and I'm certainly ready to be corrected by anyone, I think those were intentions that were never fulfilled to add additional sites. So we'll be reviewing that part of it. And the next slide here, I'm going to pass over quickly. It simply takes the budgetary, it's actually straight off the budget, retype it, overall original budget, final budget's actual expenditure for each of the calendar years. Now this begins in 2009, I'm not sure there's information in 2010 or not, we'll skip through to that. This is what we've done in 2014, but significantly is this slide that shows you for the years 2009 through 2014, the amount that the town of Waukesha budgeted in each of those years. In the middle column, the column on the far right is how much we've spent. And significantly, the budgeted total for those 6 years is $68,614 in pocket change. We've only spent $7,902. So on the bottom of it, if you do the math of it, we've spent 11.52% of what we've budgeted. You can all draw your own conclusions from that. There have been a lot of misrepresentations made about this program. I think any fair-minded person who looks at that would either have to conclude that we have budgeted far more money than we have needed over those 6 years of the $68,614, or we have far underspent what we should be spending at $7,902. And there's no other conclusion, maybe it's part of each. So that's historical. We're going to move forward from there. You see for this year, we do have $5,000 budget. I mean, the real thing that sticks out here, 2011, we budgeted $26,000 and didn't spend a dime. Now, that money reverted to the general treasury, so it's not like it was lost at the end of the year. But this year, we budgeted $1,000. The first round of testing by Guthrie Fry was $1,000. So I think at this point in time, we'll talk a little bit more about that. We've got an appropriate match at this point in time with what's been budgeted and what we could reasonably anticipate to expend. So that concludes the part of the presentation. Unless anybody wants to ask any questions about that or get back up to the slides again, you should have those same things to each of the board members on the paperwork before you. Any questions?
That was you or me. I'll blame it on you. On the second slide, what were the numbers represent behind each month? Was that the number of wells that were tested?
No, the number on that, the small numbers behind each one were simply intended to represent test 1, test 2, test 3, and a couple of those were a little awkward because they like bridged over 2 months. So if you get to the end of it, you're looking at it, the one that we did this year is what number?
17.
In there. So we have actually tested
17 times.
17 times.
What concerns me about the whole thing when I look at this slide is the erratic nature. Both, not in any individual year, but there's no consistency with when we were testing either. And I think that's a key. If we will find ourselves in, not to say that I'm an attorney and I don't play one on TV, but that's the first thing I'd raise if I was an attorney on the other side.
Just response, I think that is absolutely a legitimate concern. I think our methodology leaves something to be desired. I mean, prepared for recommendations, directions from board members. I mean, where I'm intending to try to head with this, and Clerk Nicholas helped out. She actually contacted Dr. Cherkauer a couple of weeks ago, and correct me if I've got the information wrong. He is unavailable or out of town until the 23rd of June here. My intention is to take this information plus the part that you don't have before you at the moment, which is the rather large spreadsheet that shows the static levels of the 17 tests for each of those 24 wells, to provide him with all of that information and to invite his comment. And when we need to get to the next item, which is the authorization to do that, it would be my intention to ask him to evaluate that and to make recommendations to us to frequency, consistency of the frequency of the intervals, whether he thinks we should be expanding sites or dropping them or whatever. I mean, I think we've got abundant information that we might desire to give that to him and have him make professional comment and ask him to put that in writing and present it to the board so it doesn't have to be translated through me.
Any further questions?
I have a couple of questions, Supervisor Fisher. So now we have a certified well company that goes to all of these 27 wells and drops a line down to measure the depth?
We have, yes, Guthrie and Fry has been doing that, and they're basically, they begin at the break in the interval, if you will, in late 2012. So they are doing that. One of the things that I think we need to do, and I didn't have a chance to get to the bottom of it with Kathy, but I know originally we had a proposal letter from them. I'm not sure it constituted a contract per se, but I had a discussion with them. We need to look on this end of it. I think that needs to be freshened up or whatever. Perhaps Attorney Macy might even want to take a peek at it, but at least it was their sense that we need to see what we've got in place. So from a good business perspective, we've got a proposal that's been accepted. Again, I don't know if that constitutes a contract per se, but moving forward with them, we need to get that in place, I believe.
And that $1,000 that we spent so far this year, that was for the 27 wells? They hit all 27?
Yeah, I don't remember, it was 24 or 25 or 27 or thereabouts. That was for one pass through all of the wells.
So basically, they drop a line down, record the number, comes back here to the office, and gets put in a spreadsheet, I'm assuming?
I think they may have actually been putting that into a spreadsheet. Maybe Clerk Nicholas can help out with that. But we've got multiple spreadsheets. What I'm trying to do is consolidate that into one place. But I think they've given that to us in a spreadsheet or worksheet of their part of it.
Right, we have spreadsheets from them, and we have multiples for each one that they've done, so what we're trying to do is create one spreadsheet with all the different information on it.
And prior to them doing the monitoring, who did it?
It was done by a town resident, and some folks are better at pronouncing his name than I am. Paul, somebody else? Yeah, Mr. Sigler. Schlavich. It was done by a private town resident. In fact, he was, if you go back to the first drawing or you look at your thing, he was one of the participants, is my understanding, and he was actually the person doing the testing.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Anything further? We can move on. Authorization to expend not more than $1,000 to retain Professor Douglas Chirkauer for consultation services in conjunction with the well monitoring. Again, as Supervisor Fisher said, with regards to frequency, when we do them, consistency of time. That will, I don't think we need any type of budget amendment. That's coming directly out of the budget for the well monitoring. Attorney Macy, do we need a motion or vote on that if we're taking those funds out of something that's already budgeted?
Yes.
Okay.
I will make the motion to authorize an expenditure not to exceed $1,000 to retain Professor Douglas S. Chirkauer for consultation in conjunction with the monitoring of private wells in the town of Waukesha, and the money for his services to be paid from account number, if someone can help me out.
$56201.7.
Thank you.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Any further discussion?
Just to clarify your question, the answer that I gave to your question, because he wasn't anticipated the money to be spent for this reason, the motion is to get him involved and to cap the money. It's probably not to approve the money's in the budget, So the motion's appropriate that you've made, but it's for two different reasons, and I wanted to just clear that up. One is to use the money for Professor Chirkauer and to cap it at $1,000.
Thank you. Anything further?
The only other comment that I would have is it's my understanding that his, again, through Clerk Nicholas, his billable rate would be $100 an hour. Is that correct?
That's right.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. On to J, authorization to solicit proposals from registered land surveyors to provide a comprehensive land survey of the property located at West 250, South 3567 Center Road, otherwise known as Town Hall here. Supervisor Fisher, you asked for that to be put on the agenda?
I did, and just to move it along, I will move to authorize the solicitation of proposals from registered land surveyors to provide a comprehensive land survey of the property located at W 250 South 3567 Center Road, otherwise known as the Town Hall Complex, and I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion?
Very quickly, my request to put this on, and again, this is merely to solicit proposals to be brought here for consideration. My reason for doing this is because I don't think such a thing exists, and I think it would be a very useful tool to have in hand if we look at visions for the future with what we might do, particularly with the rest of this property, with our public works area. There have been discussions previously about emergency generator, consolidating multiple electrical services and so forth. I think that would be a valuable resource to have, and again, the motion is simply limited to soliciting proposals, so it's not a commitment to spend money, but I would like us to seriously consider asking for those proposals. And I might just add on that, and perhaps Attorney Macy could comment on it. I mean, my belief is that the cost for these proposals will be less than $5,000. Is it appropriate to simply solicit proposals from local registered land surveyors as opposed to getting into any kind of formal advertisement or that type of thing?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Question. Chris, can you give us a rough idea of what that would cost to survey a property this size?
How big is the town, including the ball fields and everything?
Yes.
I don't even know, I mean, what are you looking to accomplish? Are you looking for, we would probably want to get a deed or a title report and do some research on, what easements are out there, what encumbrances are out there, all kinds of other things like that. Are you looking for a site survey? What is the end product?
I guess my vision on that is a site survey to the extent that it would necessarily include those type of things. I guess that would be appropriate. I'm particularly looking for a site survey.
Showing all the buildings and
Yeah,
and the trees
buildings,
and,
topo, utilities, that type of thing.
I hazard a guess, maybe $5,000, maybe, I don't know, $35,000.
Anything further?
And the question to the attorney was that it's okay that we just solicit proposals and there's no formal bidding required?
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to be sure I understood that.
Good, then make sure I understood the question. But I assume he was wondering if it was subject to the public bidding law.
Question. If we were to update the buildings, we would have to do something similar to this for part of it anyways, correct?
Yes.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to K, discussion of the street repair process, how the repairs are prioritized, how much we anticipate to get done, and the repair timeline for the remainder of the year. I would suggest that this is probably something that we're gonna need to handle in a workshop, specific to just that one item. come with a list of roads that we've all looked at, and prioritize which roads we're going to have repaired this year, crack filled, boiler slag, and et cetera, and then bring that, take that out for bid. And I would suggest we set a time for a workshop at the earliest date, next week, if everybody's available, would probably be advantageous.
The 20th, or the 19th? The 19th is Thursday.
Morning, daytime, evening,
Daytime's gonna be hard for me this time of year.
evening,
4 o'clock, too early?
5 would be better.
5?
Mr. Radke,
Later the better.
5,
Sure.
Mr. Dirk,
What did we say, the 20th,
yes,
No, the 19th.
19th?
Yes.
The 19th is Thursday.
sorry,
Any time after 4-ish is good with me.
5 o'clock work for everybody then?
And we will give an open meeting law notice of
I'll give notice.
On to, authorize the clerk to send out RFPs for street paving and crack filling. I think we're probably jumping the gun a little bit.
Just wanted to get it out there that we needed to do it.
Attorney Macy, is it appropriate to authorize her to send those out once we select the roads that we're going to be maintaining this year? So we've got that out of the way, we can go ahead and ask her to do that?
Sure, we don't have enough information, I'm just wondering why you wouldn't put it on the agenda for the 20th. Once you have an idea, because you may have some for crack filling, some for street paving,
Fair enough.
different procedures for each of them, and so
Fair enough.
maybe she can work on an agenda item showing the different ones. On that note, I don't plan on being there, do you need any of your staff there? Is the engineer expected to be there, the planner expected to be there? I mean, every community does it different, that's the only reason I ask.
Yeah, I was gonna suggest the DPW,
Yes.
because, I'm the one who put this on, or requested that we put on the agenda, and we dove right in, and I like what we did in dividing up the town and having us all look at a part. My concern is gonna be that, how did Larry look at his priority, and Jim and myself, and, we all look at things differently, and I think we're all gonna have to pick what we call the worst, and then have one person look at it objectively, and, kind of go in that direction, and I think a good person to do that would be the DPW guy. So,
We're required under the state law to have a program in place and rate every road and all that. Correct.
What time did we say, 5?
Yes.
5 to 5:30?
5:30 would be better.
How did we do this in the past? I mean, it seems awful late in June to be talking about roads,
In the
putting out an
past,
RFP.
primarily in the past, it was handled by the engineer. A lot of the input was through the engineer's office, some from Jerry. Not well structured.
And prior to that, it was one of the supervisors, pretty much kind of went around town and suggested some streets with the input from the DPW, kind of ran and stuff.
So have we used a specific contractor in the past?
It's been bid one.
Yeah, it goes out for bid every year.
Shouldn't be more than 25,000.
Is that the break, 25,000?
That's when you can't, no, up to 25 you can do class 1 notice. You have to solicit proposals and do a class 1 notice, but you don't have to do the formal bid.
Moving on to M, ordinance 2014-3, section 12-11-5, payment or appeal of professional services. These would be the services that we charge back to residents, for instance, from Attorney Macy, Engineer Janelli, our planner.
It's my understanding that you've used a past practice, but you have not codified it, of allowing people to come in and so this just codifies and puts into the ordinance the procedure. You were given the final draft tonight, the original ordinance has been on file because the clerk wrote it some time ago. She talked to me, she did the first draft, and then we did the review and put it in the final form. So what you have is the final form. It doesn't change anything, to my understanding of what your past practice has been, and that the people are still billed, and this is just giving them a codified procedure by which they can address the board and have due process to question the statements. You've always done it, you've always allowed people to do it, I know even in my short tenure that it's happened, so this just puts it into the ordinance, which the courts did recommend some time ago.
Can we act upon this tonight, or does this have to be laid over to another meeting?
No, you can act on it tonight, it's not a procedural type of vote. I mean, it's procedural, but it's not your rules, which is the way we've interpreted that section of the code. When we're changing a town board rule, that has to be laid over.
I'd like to make a motion that we table this to the next meeting as it was just handed out.
You didn't read it on your email? I sent it out yesterday.
I didn't see this in my email this morning, sorry. I looked at my email, but no, I must have missed it, I'm sorry.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And you did say table to the next meeting, correct?
That's right.
Two dates, right, okay. On to N. Ordinance 2014-04, ordinance creating 13-2-8 sub I, keeping the female chickens, and amending 13-3-6 sub A, sub 1, AR-SE rural suburban estate district, and 13-3-7 sub A, sub 1A, R1 single family residence district. This goes back, I think this started 2.5 years ago.
2012.
There was a problem within our ordinances that restricted owning chickens to, you had to have a minimum of a 3-acre lot, I believe. This amended it to a 1-acre lot. It is probably not the best ordinance, but, bless you. In Attorney Macy's suggestion is get this behind us, because there's been a great deal of confusion from residents. Can I have chickens? Can I not have them? How many can I have? What kind can I have? And if we so choose to, since this was passed quite some time ago, but never signed, never put into practice, if we choose to fix it at some future point, then let's do that. But to stop the confusion for residents, that we should move forward on this. Please.
We have, our current ordinance says that you have to have the 3 acres for 20 chickens. We have had on the website for over a year that we have this proposed ordinance that allows them to have 5 chickens for 1 acre. So we've been getting calls, especially at the end of school year, where they want to take their chickens home from school, and now have found out that it's still 3 because 3 acres, although it's been passed. At the Plan Commission, we did our best to take out the pieces that the Plan Commission and the town board addressed and passed, but it was never signed. So we're bringing it back just to have it signed, approved, have it signed, and then if we wanted to discuss and do something later in the future, we can, but we wanted to clean this up from the past.
So we are not redoing the ordinance, we're not, all the clerk did is try to put into a form that can be signed what the Plan Commission approved, recommended, and what the town board adopted. I have a draft motion in preparing for tonight's meeting. It's very short, and I'll walk you through it. Because there's a lot of confusion, and this isn't something you do very often, you know? So what the clerk did is she put the document together, We're not really approving the document. It's a motion to acknowledge that the document submitted accurately represents what the prior plan commission recommended and the prior town board adopted and authorizes the signing of the same. We're not redoing anything, we're just putting this into the record that, to the best of everybody's knowledge, this is what was approved, and feel comfortable because some of you weren't here and you're gonna be asked to sign it, that everybody acknowledges. You can always go back and revisit this issue at another time, that's not what we're trying to do tonight. In fact, you really can't revisit it tonight. You either have to decide. I'm gonna tell you that if somebody brought a lawsuit against you saying you have to sign this document, it's called a writ of mandamus, the judge would order you to sign the document, because this is what the record, this is, whether you voted for it or against it at the time, at least two or three of you weren't even here, so, you know, it's just to protect you that all we're doing is acknowledging that the document accurately represents it and authorizes you to sign it. You're not for it or against the actual concept, you're just saying this is the document represents. Does that make sense? It's like if you're not here for minutes, you know, we have to have a system for you to approve minutes when you weren't the ones on the board to approve the minutes. And so it's a very similar type of comparison.
Question then, is this the ordinance we've been following, but it hasn't been signed now?
No, we're still following
The
the
five-
old
the
one
5
because this
acre?
wasn't signed.
Okay.
Right.
Is there a motion?
I will move to accept the motion as it's been presented to us.
Second.
I'll second.
Discussion.
I would like to speak to this, and I appreciate the clarification that Attorney Macy and others have brought to this, and I would ask, just even as a, I guess, personal privilege, that Clerk Nicholas would incorporate into the minutes the fact that I voted against this motion originally. I'm opposed to it. I'm opposed to it philosophically because I think it's an overreach of government. I think it's arbitrary to talk in terms of number of chickens and acreage and so forth, so I'm absolutely opposed to the motion. Given that we've got an obligation to, I guess, confirm or acknowledge what was done previously, I'll get on board with that, but I would ask the minutes to clearly reflect that I'm opposed philosophically to the chicken ordinance and remain so.
To the ordinance, not this motion.
Correct.
Thank you.
I was here that night. It was a really long night.
Yeah.
And a lot of overrunning with the 3-minute rule. Here's my problem with this motion in particular, though. To acknowledge that the document submitted accurately represents what the planning commission recommended and the prior town board adopted. I don't know in my own mind, from a process point of view, that I can acknowledge that I feel that way, and I was here.
Oh, that's a great point, I think we should walk you through it. I was
Okay.
given, as a courtesy, I was given a copy of the planning commission minutes and the town board minutes, and the original ordinance.
Okay.
And there is, you know, there is some confusion. It's, God forbid, you hate to give examples that might cause controversy, so I don't want to, but we did the same thing with the plan of operation for the 5 diamonds. We went through all of the documentation and we summarized it as best we could. This one was a lot simpler. It says that we're gonna strike the permit procedure and the fee procedure, and we're gonna have the chief, the fire chief, Mr. Buchholz, was gonna put together a chart, okay? So we've interpreted that there's one section that dealt with permits and fees, and we took that section out, and you'll see number 2, it says intentionally left blank. That was the whole section on you had to apply for a permit, you had to pay the respective fees, and you had to show how you were gonna corral the chickens or something, I'm paraphrasing. But, so that's all that actually physically was done, because we don't really need a chart as much, because it's 5 chickens per acre. So the chart says, on 1 acre you get 5 chickens, on 2 acres you get 10 chickens, you know, maximum. So that's all the chart said, and we didn't change the ordinance for the chart, okay? Because there was no change to the ordinance from the clerk's research, and I agree with her research. So I think that's a great question. What did the motion say? The motion, there was some discussion about, I just think this is overkill, that's basically what I think it said. No permit, no fee, they should just be able to have their chickens. And Chief put a chart together. That's, Kathy, am I paraphrasing that correctly?
Correct, and the chart was not part of the ordinance itself, it was just supposed to be a useful chart. If somebody called us, we'd be able to tell them how many chickens they could have per acre. But it wasn't actually written in the ordinance referring to that chart.
So that's the only thing that changed in the actual ordinance you have in front of you tonight is section 2 was removed. And so we can give you the original, I can read you what section 2, every other word in the ordinance, including the severability clause, which isn't my standard severability clause. We don't have any whereas clauses, which we normally like, and so your ordinances are gonna look different than this ordinance. But we didn't feel as a staff that we were at liberty to tweak anything else other than to do exactly what the planning commission said and the town board then adopted. So I think that's a great question. You should be convinced that this document does represent what the planning commission, you know, recommended and the town board adopted. But that's all we did. We removed section 2. And there were 3 parts to section 2. One is you had to apply for a permit, one is you had to pay the fees, and the other is I think you had to show how the fencing or something was going to be. But that's in another paragraph, so I think the clerk was comfortable removing that section because there's another section that deals with that topic. Is that helpful?
It is.
And it may not
Yes, thank
answer
you.
your question, I understand, but I think that's a legitimate, how do you know what we did and why we did it? And we do have the planning commission minutes, the town board minutes, the original draft, and this draft, and we can give you all of that or walk you through in greater detail if you like.
Supervisor Durr, does that give you some comfort level?
Some.
Further discussion?
No, nothing on the top of my head right now.
All in favor? Aye. Wasn't a roll call vote.
I was never ashamed of my vote.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. On to O, discussion of road weight limits, permanent limits, seasonal limits. Who makes the decision on when limits go on and when they come off? Okay. Being as it is that we have a new liaison to the DPW department, I would suggest that this is something that we would hand on over to Supervisor Durr for his research to determine how other communities determine when road limits go on, specifically in the spring. If there are other roads that are in danger that should be permanently weight restricted.
Nice handoff. I see you even have a copy here at my table. Sure, that would be fine.
Any further discussion? Then let's move on to 9, accounts payable, and I apologize.